What is up, you guys? Glitches here, and welcome back to the channel. I know I have been gone for several months at this point. Life has been keeping me very, very busy. For those of you that don't know, my VFX job during the day was really busy for a while. We had back-to-back movies that we were finishing. I also just had my second child. She was born just a few weeks ago, so that's definitely kept me busy. And I was also dumb enough to buy and move into a brand new, bigger home at the exact same time. So as you could imagine, I've had a lot on my plate lately, and we're just now finally starting to get settled in. As you guys can see, we still got a ton of boxes to take care of, but I'm slowly working my way through it. And after doing the little demo of this new build, I promised you guys that I would get this full build guide out to you as soon as possible, and I'm a man of my word. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. This is officially the latest and greatest Update 8, forging the path, if you will, greatest hunter build of all time. It is by far the strongest hunter that I've made thus far. I love what the devs did with the new updates to the skill tree. There's a ton of really cool combinations that I found with the hunter that made it arguably one of the best classes to play in this latest update. So right out of the gate, let's go over the armor. So some really interesting things that I found about this armor that kind of tied in with my previous hunter build, and that is the current state of the Skullstalker helmet. And pretty much all the Skullstalker armor pieces right now are still bugged. These were the main armor pieces that I chose for my previous hunter build, and I figured by this point that these armor pieces would have been fixed. But the thing that is broken on them currently is the skill shot damage. For those of you that don't know, skill shot damage should not give you any additional damage whatsoever unless you are hitting an enemy's weak spot. But for whatever reason right now, you are getting the 25% skill shot damage bonus, at least for the helmet. I think it's 12% on the chest and gloves potentially. You're getting that regardless of where you hit the enemy. And a perfect way to kind of demonstrate this and prove it is just by using our quick little test dummy here, aka our crafting bench. So as you can see, a really quick way to test this out, for example, is the Skullstalker gloves. They have a 9% flat bow damage, which is the same as the 9% range damage on the Quetzal Hunter gloves. The Quetzal Hunters have 9% ranged enemies bonus damage, which won't count because this is just a table. And the Skullstalker gloves have 13% skill shot damage, which shouldn't count because the table doesn't have a weak point or a weak spot. So in theory, equipping either of these two gloves and shooting this table should do the exact same amount of damage. So if we go ahead and equip the Quetzal Hunter gloves and shoot just a default arrow that doesn't crit, we're doing 781 damage. However, when we go ahead and equip the Skullstalker gloves, you'll notice that it goes from 781 to 934, and that is because the 13% additional skill shot damage is counting even for our regular hits when it isn't supposed to, and it's also multiplying on both the helmet and the chest piece. So that is why, in my opinion, the Skullstalker set right now is going to be the best in slot overall for armor to choose. There are some alternate options for the boots, pants, and potentially the chest that I'm going to be recommending for early to mid game, and or if you're just a newer player and need a little bit more survivability. But if you want to min max your end game damage and do as much damage as possible until they fix this armor set, the Skullstalker set is definitely the route to go, because the critical strike chance and stuff you get is normal, but that skill shot damage is literally broken right now. It's giving out way more extra damage than it's supposed to. So for the helmet, we have the Skullstalker helmet. For the chest piece, there's two potential options that I would recommend. If you want to min-max the highest possible endgame damage, obviously run the Skullstalker chest. But if you're a newer player and or in the very late game areas like the Drac territories, and you're going against some of like the brutes or the really high end level Drac enemies that can like two-shot you, I would recommend throwing on the tried and true Sun Piercer chest plate. And the main reason that I like to use this is because it just gives you a shit ton of health. 360 flat health just from the armor piece itself, 36 flat stamina, but it also has a bunch of additional perks now after the update, giving you 19 cutting armor, 20 piercing armor, blood rage we can skip, veteran we can skip, but another 120 health. So you're getting almost 500 additional health just from using this chest piece, which is really, really good in terms of extra survivability. As for the Skullstalker chest, 84 for physical and magical resistance. You get 72 flat stamina, which is amazing on a hunter. That 13% skill shot damage, which is just giving us flat bonus damage regardless of where we hit enemies right now. Has 19 blunt armor and 20 piercing armor. A point in ranger, which is an amazing bonus to get for skills, because that gives us buffs to multiple different things: crit rate, dexterity in general for range damage, and like a few other things. 24 flat stamina, and +1 to fatal precision. And for those of you that don't know, fatal precision, if we go here, gives us increased critical strike chance and increased critical strike damage. So really, really good to have on any piece of armor for a bow user right out the gate. Moving on to the gloves, again, best in slot for damage are going to be these Skullstalker gloves. These are 21 for both physical and magical damage, a +9% flat bow damage, which is a little bit higher damage multiplier. The core weapon damage multipliers are going to give you a little bit more of a benefit than the secondary, like elemental damage modifiers. So even though it's only 9%, it is actually a pretty significant boost, plus that broken 13% skill shot damage. This has another 19 cutting and cutting armor and 20 shroud armor, plus 2 points to skill shot, which is just going to increase the skill shot damage bonus. And I believe with how we have it maxed out in the tree, it's going to end up being 100% additional damage. So basically doubling all of our skill shot damage pretty much, and another 18 stamina regeneration. One interesting thing that I will mention while we're on gloves is some of the later game best in slot arrows, like the golden tip arrows, for example, can be a little tricky to craft if you haven't built up your base quite yet. So a great alternative that you can use as a hunter now is going to be the Eternal Frost Arrow level 2 and level 1. And if you don't have the Skullstalker set yet, what you can do in a interesting combination that I found out is if you equip the Frozen Gauntlets that give increased ice damage, as well as a bonus point to Ice Man, which increases our ice damage even further. And then instead of using the 2 go-to rings that I'm going to recommend, if you use in the earlier game double Rings of Frost, that combination of the double Rings of Frost and the gauntlets will actually make the Eternal Frost arrows do more than the max level craftable arrow that you can get in the game. And with the perks that we're going to be taking, you'll be able to spam infinite frost arrows without ever having to worry about running out of mana. So it can save you on a ton of materials in the early to mid game potentially, and with the right combination of armor, do just as much, if not more damage with that particular arrow than your typical crafted arrows. So keep that in mind. It's not what I'm going to recommend for the max damage in the end game, but to get you through the early mid game and help you save some resources, that double ring combo and the Frozen Gauntlets is a good option to try out. But for now, Skullstalker gloves. For the pants, we have a new best in slot winner. These are brand new with the latest update, and they are called the Wayfarer pants. 49 both physical and magical armor. We get plus 12% sprint speed, which is amazing. Minus 12 or 20% stamina depletion when climbing. 30% when gliding, which is going to be amazing for traversal. Flat 24 stamina for its perk, 18 stamina regeneration, and we get double, or no, actually single for the pants, +1 to runner for more traversal as well, +1 to airborne for gliding, and +1 to rebound, which is going to help our stamina regeneration even more as well. So really, really strong pair of pants, and this is pretty much my go-to pants for every class right now in the game. You just really can't beat it with the stamina perks you get. Last but not least, for the boots, best in slot in my opinion, for 99.9% of the time that you're going to be playing, are going to be the Drakian boots, +12 to stamina regeneration again, and then a minus 0.2 second stamina regeneration delay. This is very, very beneficial in case you actually do run out of stamina for whatever reason. That 0.2 second delay is insanely fast, and the second your stamina fully runs out, it just instantly starts recharging again. There's no like delayed time before it starts regenerating, and it regenerates very, very quickly. So really, really handy. But these particular boots, especially for the late game territory, in the north, gives you +5 flat damage against all Drak enemies, and in that latest endgame zone, there's really only two types of enemies you're going to be facing: scavengers and Drak. So over 50% of the enemies you're going to be facing, you're just getting a flat bonus damage against them. 19 cutting armor, 24 flat stamina, 20 piercing armor, an additional 10% damage against all wildlife, and another 10% damage against Drak, bringing it to 15 total bonus damage against Drak once you fully upgrade it. So really, really strong end game armor piece, especially in that far north Drak territory in the content that we have in the game right now. The only other option that I will recommend, and I'll show a little pro tip here how I utilize it, is for the Fell Dragon Youngling boss in particular. I would recommend carrying around the Skullstalker shoes as well. They have obviously not as good of a stamina regeneration delay, and you don't get the Drak bonuses, but these particular boots come with double perk points into Eagle's Bane, which, for those of you that don't know, increases your damage against flying enemies, and the Fell Dragon Youngling boss is a fell flying enemy, and I believe each point that you put into Eagle's Bane gives you 10%. So by equipping these boots for that fight specifically, you're instantly increasing all bow damage that you do to that boss by an additional 20% right out of the gate, which is pretty crazy. And what I like to do is I actually just equipped that alternate pair of boots to my 4 space on my hotbar, and anytime I want to test out going against that boss or any flying enemy, for example, you can just quickly hit the 4 key or whatever the hotbar key is on your controller and just hot swap those boots on the fly. That will prevent you from having to go into your menu, manually equip it, swap it back and forth. If you put an armor piece on your hotbar, you can actually swap them very easily. So a little pro tip there. So that is all of the main armor choices that I would recommend. Moving on to the rings. Best in slot for the hunter is going to be double rings of the ancients. You get a flat 5% critical strike chance, which is amazing. You get a little bit of well rested. Warrior's Path and Mage Apprentice aren't going to make that big of a difference. However, the core perks for each class, like Marksman or Warrior's Path or Barbarian's Path, the key class specific damage modifiers that are closer to the center of the skill tree, what I found out in testing is they actually give a higher damage multiplier than the secondary, more outer skill bonuses like elemental bonuses and things like that. So this 1 point in Marksman actually gives you a much higher damage, raw damage output than, say, a Ultimate Ring of Stamina that has like Sniper or Fatal Precision, giving you increased critical strike and critical damage. Just that 1 extra point, or in this case 2, because we're going to run 2 of them, significantly increases your damage output. And I can just show you real quick just to kind of prove it here. Double Rings of Stamina, in my opinion, probably would have been the best secondary alternative if you're not using the Frost Gauntlets. And if we shoot the table here, just to get an idea of what our base damage is going to be, we're doing 846 with a normal shot. If we go ahead and a quick double Rings of the Ancients, not only are we getting 10% bonus crit chance because we're running 2 of them, but our raw base damage increases to 914, so almost a 100 damage boost that you're getting from switching between those 2 ring types. So very, very strong combination, and what I definitely recommend using if you want to get the maximum DPS possible. For the shield, we're not going to worry about it because we're hunter. We're going to be running dual wielding daggers for our melee. But moving on to the weapons, best in slot for this build and the best bow period in the game, if you build the hunter properly, is going to be the Forsaken bow. This is a 100% elemental based bow, which we are going to be taking advantage of and boosting even further with certain skills in the skill tree as well. It's got all the different types of elements. It has poison, magic, shroud, shock, ice, and fire damage. I'm also throwing a max level Gem of Currents on there. For those of you that don't know, Gem of Currents, if you soak yourself, and I'll show you a really easy way to do that here in a second. If you soak yourself, damaging enemies with this weapon will apply the soaked debuff and or wet debuff onto enemies that you hit, and that debuff will stay on them for about 10 seconds. Damaging those soaked enemies has a 50% chance to deal 28 bonus shock damage, which will actually get increased a little bit further because of perks that we're going to be taking in the tree. For those of you that don't know why this soak status is so beneficial, it does reduce the stamina and stamina regeneration of you and the enemies that you hit. But the big thing that it does and why it helps us do so much more damage is because it also reduces the ice and shock resistance on enemies by 30%, which is huge. So as long as the enemies that you're hitting are soaked, which should be 100% of the time, you're going to be doing a bunch of free bonus damage just because the enemy resistances are so low. And this particular bow is a full elemental bow. The other option, and the only reason I take this, is because in the latest Forging the Path update, they added really cool ultimate abilities for each new weapon, and the bow is no different, no exception, if you will. It has a really cool piercing charge shot that you can do, and for that particular ability, I recommend taking the Trader's Bow. This is basically the exact same elemental bow as the Forsaken Bow. The only difference is the Forsaken Bow is a fast draw speed variation that has a 0.6 second draw speed, whereas the Trader's Bow has a higher base power at 94.5, but has a 1 second draw speed. However, if we're only using this bow for our ultimate ability, then you basically can whip it out and then not have to worry about firing. You just instantly hit R, in this case on keyboard, to activate your ultimate ability, fire that charge shot with your stronger bow instantaneously, and then immediately swap back to the Forsaken Bow and start unleashing a flurry of more faster draw speed arrows. So that's how I like to run this particular build. 99% of the time I run Forsaken. It's really, really fast. You can apply stun a lot quicker. You can just hit enemies a lot quicker. It still has a decent 69 base damage, but once your ultimate fills up, you quickly hit your hotkey, switch to the Trader's Bow, which has higher base raw power, do that ultimate shot, and then immediately switch back. So those are the two best in slot bows. A lot of people talked about the Avalanche Starter Bow or the Rattlesnake Bow because we are taking advantage of the Soak debuff, and Rattlesnake, for example, has Opportunistic, which will give us 12% increased critical strike chance. Honestly, I didn't notice too much of a difference, and the base damage on this bow is not going to be anywhere near as good after the skills we take compared to the Forsaken Bow, and especially not the Avalanche Starter. It just has way too low of base raw. I don't know why everyone is so obsessed with this bow. I mean, I can equip it right now and just show you how poor the damage is. So Rattlesnake Bow right out the gate. Base shot is doing 879. Avalanche Starter Bow fully maxed out, only 729, so that's even worse. Trader's Bow, this is going to be the highest damage possible, but the slowest draw speed. That is sitting at, I don't crit here. Come on. 5 crits in a row. There we go. 1103. And then the Forsaken Bow regular hit is sitting at 914. So as you can see, with how we're building the Hunter, Forsaken and Trader Bow are by far the strongest bows compared to any of the other top performing bows in the game right now. So that's why I chose them. I did testing on pretty much every single potential bow that you could use, and these two were by far the best. And I also run a Gem of Currents on the Trader's Bow as well, so we're always going to be applying that Soak debuff and never having to worry about it. I did test out another copy of the Forsaken Bow with the Gem of Aerobatics, I believe it's called, because they changed that a little bit to now anytime you hover in the air with Bee Sting, it does 6 projectile shurikens that attract to an enemy, dealing 17 additional piercing damage. Honestly, those shurikens did not do anywhere near as much damage as I was thinking they were going to do in comparison to the buffed 25% shock damage from the Gem of Currents. So after my testing, I realized that that wasn't going to be the best one to go with. So it is fun, it is flashy, but if you want top DPS, Gem of Currents is the way to go. So that is our bows. For daggers, I changed things up a little bit differently this time. In my previous Hunter build, I focused more on the poison side of things. It did a lot of damage over time and could kill things pretty quickly with poison. The only downside is if you look at the updated tree, to get those same poison buff bonus perks, you have to invest 7 skill points now. Venomous Blades, to get that to max and actually make it worth it, is going to be 3 points here. And then Venom Mastery, to increase the Venom Blades dagger perk by 100% is another 4. So 7 points total to make it basically as good as the default raw daggers that we're going to be using. So instead of wasting the points in an area that wasn't necessary, what I'm going to be using now for my primary daggers is going to be the Oathbreakers and or the Lightforge daggers. These two daggers are actually identical. They just have different names. The stats and perks are exactly the same. This just has the highest base raw damage of any of the daggers in the game right now. And it also does cutting damage, which is why I'm using the Gem of Bleeding. Critical strikes with cutting damage cause bleeding on an enemy, dealing 28 bonus damage per second for about 10 seconds to give you a nice little extra boost of damage with these as well. I tried a few other gems on it, but for how fast the daggers attack, you actually crit pretty frequently, so you proc this a lot, and it can give you really easy bonus damage on daggers with this particular gem at level 50. I also tried the Brood Brothers Eye, which was the dagger set that basically revolved around venomous blades. Again, it did about the same amount of damage as the Oathbreakers. We just had to invest 7 points in the skill tree to get it to that point, so it wasn't really worth it. You can do it if you want. I just don't think it's worth spending the points. The Brood Mother's Eye and the Shellbreaker daggers are the same type of scenario. They are identical daggers. They just are cosmetically different. The perks and the damage output are exactly the same. I also tried, if you were in early to mid game, using the Ice Gauntlets and the 2 Rings of Frost, the best in slot daggers that revolve around ice damage, in this case being the Ice Coated daggers and the Horn daggers. These are another duplicate cosmetic dagger set, exactly the same, just different looks and different cosmetics, and that still wasn't the same amount of damage as the Oathbreakers. It does pretty decent if you're running that build, but then you lose damage on your arrows. So for this particular build, to min-max the skill points as best as possible, the max raw damage daggers are going to be the best in slot, in my opinion, for this type of scenario. So I'm running the Oathbreakers right now. Moving on, that is all of our weapons. We can go on to consumables and ammunition. I really only take 3 different types of arrows with all my hunter builds. You're definitely going to want to have the best in slot craftable arrows for your particular level. At endgame, the golden steel arrows are going to be the best now, sitting at 36 damage. The other thing you're obviously going to want to take for early to mid game and even late game, depending on the enemy type, because some enemies are more susceptible to frost damage, is going to be the Eternal Frost Arrow level 2. That is infinite cast with some of the skills we're taking. You'll never have to worry about running out of mana. Does a decent 26 damage as ice damage, and like I mentioned previously, if you have the double Rings of Frost and the Frozen Gauntlets on, this arrow will actually do more damage than the Golden Steel arrow, but the maximum damage will just be lower, so that's why I don't do it. But if you want to save on materials, it's still a decent option. And then last but not least, obviously, we want our tried and true stun arrows. Amazing for beefy elites or the Fell Dragon boss, for example, with multi-shot and things like that. You can take stun enemies and fill their bar up insanely quickly with this particular build. So really only the 3 arrow types that I would recommend or even need to grab. Some of the alternate rings that I want to talk about would be the Ultimate Rings of Stamina. They are good. You get additional crit rate and crit chance, as well as some insane amounts of stamina regeneration. You can also, if you're kind of comboing this with the Sunpiercer chestplate, throw on in the early game, even in the mid game, the Gemini ring, because this has 5% health leech and 3 health regeneration. So you'll have a little bit more survivability there as well. Basically every multi-shot or critical hit with your bow will just refill a huge chunk of your health with every single shot. So really, really nice. I just tend to not use it because once you get to the end game and have played for a while, you kind of know how to maneuver and dodge a little bit better. I don't really find myself getting hit that much, so I tend to prefer maximum damage over survivability. So that's why I run the Rings of Ancients. So that's the ammunition. For consumables, obviously you want your best in slot health and mana potions. At end game, it's going to be the ultimate health potion and the ultimate mana potion. I also like to bring the Drak Soulward Flask especially in the final territory, because this gives a flat 10% bonus damage against all Drac enemies. We're going to want to bring our portable water pump. This is our primary way of applying the soak status debuff on ourselves to activate our Gem of Currents, and I'll demo that here in a second on how to apply that. I also bring pocket heaters. You do get a tiny bit of frost resistance on this build, but if you're in the highest peaks of the Albanese Summits territory, you will be susceptible a little bit to hypothermia. So carrying these on you, just popping one will give you that +2 bonus frost resist and put you right over that hump to where you can get a solid like 4 or 5 minutes at a time without having to worry about any cold issues. I also like to take the elixir buff for any time I'm in the Shroud or going against the Fell Dragon boss for the 20% damage against all Fell enemies. Obviously, Flask of the Fell is going to be amazing for hunters just because of the bonus stamina. Because we're using a fully elemental bow, you can also take the Prayer of the Flame Scroll, because that 20% increase to fire damage will actually make our fire damage on the bow do a little bit more damage as well. But for the 4 core consumable items, the best in slot by far is going to be the Taro Root Curry. 60 flat mana, again, great for that Eternal Frost Arrow, but you're getting 21% flat range damage and 21% dagger damage. For our meat option, we are going to take Chicken Soup, 160 health for more survivability, another 6% range damage and 6% dagger damage. We're going to take the Sweet Mocha for our liquid, 30 stamina regeneration, and another 6 ranged and dagger damage. And then last but not least, we have our Honey Baked Banana for our sweet spot. This is 21 health regeneration and 85 stamina regeneration. However, we will be taking the Sweet Tooth perk in the tree, which will increase the stamina regeneration on all sweet foods by an additional 50%. So that 85 stamina regeneration is actually going to be more like 120 stamina regeneration because it's going to be 50% stronger. So really, really good there. The other alternate options that you can take if you don't want to use the Honey Baked Banana, specifically for the Shroud or Fell Dragon boss, would be the Glimmer Gentian Tea. Again, because of that 15% bonus damage against all Fell enemies. So that's why I would recommend that. So feel free to swap those out if you're going into that boss fight. You will do a little bit more damage, but for typical just running around and exploring and killing normal enemies, the Honey Baked Banana is going to be just good enough to give us a ton of stamina regen and health regen. So that is our consumables. For a quick little demo of the water pump, how that works is you just fill it up literally at any water source. You can walk in anytime it runs out. If you're just standing in water, you can just hold right click. That will fill that meter up and it lasts quite a long time. You only need a tiny little bit to soak yourself if you do it properly. And then what you need to do is go up to any flat surface or wall. It could be a tree trunk, it could be a wall, and just aim up a little bit and just spray it up the wall. And that will pour the water back down onto you and give you that soak debuff. So all of our shots with our bow and arrows will now activate the Gem of Currents because we have that debuff on us. You get 30 seconds of the soak status at first. Once that soak status ends, it'll automatically change to the wet status. And with the armor we have equipped, instead of sitting here waiting and showing you what the final amount is, I'll just tell you, you get about 5 minutes even of the wet status debuff after the soaked runs off. So plenty of time to take advantage of that without having to worry about refreshing the water pump on yourself. With how strong this build is, there's not a single mob in the game that I have found that's taking me longer than 5 minutes to kill. I mean, the pinnacle Fell Dragon Youngling boss, if you guys watched my previous little power demo there, literally only took 42 seconds to take down. So there really isn't many enemies that will survive longer than that in this game. So 5 minutes is plenty enough time for that debuff. And what's cool is that you don't have to craft it craft like the water balloons, for example. Once you make the water pump once, you can literally go to any stream, any lake, water in your base, anything like that, and just refill it for free. And you've got basically like 30 water balloons worth of water just sitting in this thing ready to be used at any given point, which is awesome. So that is all of the consumable items. Moving on to the most important part of the build, the skills. I love what they did to the updated tree. There's some really cool combinations that we got, and I love how you can boost things with the perks on your armor now as well. So I'll kind of try and go over this in like the order that I would pick if you're starting out early game. Right out the gate, you're going to want to take double jump for obvious reasons. It just makes your traversal that much easier. I would also probably take 2 early points into Constitution to give you a little bit more survivability and additional health. Once you get those, you can head over to the Ranger tree or the Assassin tree, because the first few perks in both are pretty good. On the Assassin's tree, we got the point in Dexterity for more range damage. 1 point into Airborne for making our glider consume less stamina. I'm only putting 1 point because some of the armor we're taking is going to give us another free point in this, bringing it to 24%. Take the Updraft perk because that'll make traversal with your glider that much easier as well. And then I actually stop at this first little section because we don't really need this special ability with daggers or any of the assassin type perks. We're going to work our way around to the back side of this tree from the other direction. So from here, we can jump over to the Ranger tree because there is a ton of amazing perks we're going to take from this one. Point in Dexterity for range damage, max out 3 out of 3. The Marksman perk, damage with all bows, is increased by 25%. This is a no-brainer. We're also going to be getting +2 to this because of our armor, so 5 points total. We want 3 out of 3 on counter battery. Damage against all ranged enemies will be increased by 24%. Great against flyers and things like that. Or not flyers, but magic users and or enemy archers and things like that. We also want 3 out of 3 on sniper. Range weapon critical strike chance is increased by 10%. This increases by 2% additional per extra level. And because of our armor, we're getting 2 additional points. So 5 points total into sniper here. Moving on, we have 5 points total because of our armor into skill shot. Skill shot damage, because of all the points, is going to be increased by 100%. And as I mentioned earlier, it's counting for more than just weak spot hits right now with the Skullstalker armor set. So this is going to be boosting that damage even more. Take the bow specialization for sure for our ultimate bow ability. 3 points in Vitality Surge. Critical strikes with ranged weapons will restore our stamina, so you almost never run out of stamina with this build as long as you're firing. I do take Bee Sting for certain situations where you're kind of overwhelmed with a lot of enemies. You can just double jump into the air and hover for a bit and just multi-shot a lot of those enemies down without getting hit. So cool little perk there. 3 points into Eagle's Bane. This is a big one. Bonus damage, 30% in this case, against all flying enemies, especially the Fell Dragon boss. This comes in handy really well. 3 maxed out points into Ranger with an additional 1 because of our armor. Increases your dexterity and endurance attributes by 4, and the base stamina generation is increased by 20. The bonus point that we're getting into it increases the dexterity and endurance level by an additional point and gives us 5 additional stamina regeneration because of our armor, so that's awesome. We got 3 out of 3 into Blessed Arrows. Critical strikes with bows restore 24 mana. This is the maxed out perk that's going to allow you to infinitely spam the Eternal Frost Arrow without ever having to worry about running out of mana. With all the other perks that we're taking, you crit like crazy with your bow. So as long as you're critting, your mana is going to refill fast enough to just constantly spam those frost arrows without ever running out, which is really, really nice. Quick point in Dexterity for more range damage. Definitely want to take multi-shot. These 3 perks right here are huge for this build. Shooting regular arrows has a 20% chance to spawn a flurry of arrows that spreads slightly and shoots out additional projectiles. Multi-shot spread adds a 25% chance to spawn 1 additional arrow to that multi-shot, just making the spread even bigger. And then the biggest one is going to be multi-shot trigger, which allows all of your special arrows, and in our case, the stun arrow, for example, to also proc the flurry of arrows ability as well, which allows us to shoot multiple stun arrows at once. That's how you're able to stun like the Fell Dragon boss in like 3 hits, because if you hit him 2 or 3 times with 1 shot, it's going to just fill that stun meter up insanely fast. So a really, really strong combination of perks here. You definitely want to take a maxed out Fatal Precision 3 out of 3. We're getting another bonus one because of our armor as well. That will increase critical strike chance by 4% and critical strike damage by 20%. Then we start working our way around to the back side of the Assassin's Tree to start boosting the damage of our daggers a little bit. We've got Slice and Dice. After a critical strike with daggers, the base damage of your next bow attack within 20 seconds is increased by 50%. If you're really good at timing your abilities and min-maxing your damage as a veteran, what you can do is switch to your daggers on an easy mob right before using your bow ultimate ability. Get that critical strike with your dagger, switch to the trader's bow, and just instantly activate your ultimate. That ultimate will do a shit ton of bonus damage just because it's the ultimate ability. You'll get bonus damage because you're doing the trader's bow, which is the longer draw speed, harder hitting bow. But then because you crit with your daggers, it's also going to be getting 50% increased damage from that as well with Slice and Dice. So if you know your timings right, you can make that ultimate ability do a shit ton of damage, which is pretty nuts with that one particular perk. Endurance for additional stamina. Expose weakness. Critical strikes with daggers increase damage dealt to the enemy by 25% for 5 seconds. You can combo this with bows as well, so get a couple quick critical hits with your daggers in, switch to bows, and basically they did 25% increased damage to them for additional 5 seconds after with your bow. Graceful Stride is very, very important, probably the most important perk of any skill on the tree for Hunter, and because it gains 1 point of dexterity for every 2 levels of flame, and if you're maxed out at level 9 for your flame altar, that's 4 additional points of dexterity, basically giving you 20% additional bow damage just flat out with this one perk, which is insanely strong. We also take maxed out dagger mastery to increase our flat dagger damage by an additional 50%. And then we move on to Veiled Vigor, increases your maximum health by 6 times your dexterity attribute. And we are taking every single dexterity point possible on the tree, bringing us to 23 total dexterity. So that is a ton of bonus health that you're going to be getting with this one perk once it's maxed out. We're also going to be taking a point in dexterity here, followed by 3 points into backstab mastery. We are going to be taking blink, so repositioning behind enemies, especially after they're stunned, is very easy to do with this build. So having that 60% backstab bonus damage will make you do insane damage from behind if you're able to maneuver properly. So that's why I like taking that. Moving on to the Beastmaster tree, point in endurance for more stamina, followed by Mithridatist, 25% chance to avoid being poisoned, which is always nice. I'm really only going up this tree to get the extra points in dexterity. Point in endurance, point in dexterity, point in endurance, and then Vocal language. This is kind of a throwaway. It's not bad in the early game, maybe. Vocal within 50 meters no longer attack you unless you provoke them. Quick point in dexterity for additional damage, and then I also take Endurance of the Flame. This is the exact same type of perk as the Graceful Stride, only instead of getting 4 bonus dexterity, we will now get 4 bonus endurance as well, giving us a ton more stamina. So really good perk to take there. Moving on to the Survivor tree, point in endurance, followed by 3 maxed out points into runner. We will also get +1 because of our armor into this, making our sprint speed increased by 20% and stamina cost while sprinting decreased by 20%, making just general traversal way better. Point in endurance, followed by good metabolism. We're not really going to be generating orbs with this build because we're not taking swift shot sustenance, but this perk also increases the efficiency of our health and mana potions, making them restore 20% more of their respected resource. Point in dexterity, followed by maxed out 3 out of 3 on rebound. This will become 4 with our armor, making our base stamina regeneration increase by another 40%, which is huge. Definitely want to take Dessert Stomach. This is what's going to allow us to get that 4th food slot. Sweet Tooth, this was the one I mentioned that makes our banana stamina regen food do 120 stamina regeneration instead of 80. And then last but not least, the point in endurance for more flat stamina. Moving on, after we have already gotten these points in Constitution, by this point we're kind of hitting the late game, and you want to start building into your bow damage and your survivability more. So we pick up the 3 points into Heavy Plates. Equipped armor grants 12% increased physical armor. 3 points into Shiny Plates, getting 12% increase to our magical armor. Skip the Purification, we don't really care about things in the Shroud. Quick point in Constitution, followed by Tower and Warden. This will increase our magical and physical resistances by 10%, which is nice. 1 point into absorb. When you receive magic damage, you have a 4% chance to restore mana. I really don't feel like the additional 2 points are needed because the perk we're taking up here, the Blessed Arrows, gives us more than enough mana regeneration with the critical strikes we're doing. So it's better to just min-max our skill points as needed. Put the 1 point in here to pick up the 2 points in Constitution for more health, followed by Thick Skin. This is an important one. This is similar to the Graceful Strides perk, where you get the 4 points from your Flame Altar for Dexterity. This one gives you 4 points in Constitution, giving you 200 additional health, which is pretty nuts, because I think you get 50 health per Constitution point. And then last but not least, rounded out with Earth Aura. We only want to take 1 point in this because this build is primarily for solo play, and the upgraded points into the skill only increase the range, not the quality of the resistance buff that you're going to get. You emit a magical aura, increasing all physical and magical resistances by 10% for you and all allies within 4 meters. Because it's a solo build, we don't care about how big the range is, so we only need the first 1 initial point, and then we're good to go on that. For the more maneuverability, those 7 points that I was mentioning before that we're saving by not taking poison, you can pretty much take that exact 7 points and put a point in intelligence, 1 point in arcane deflection, and a point into blink to give you way better maneuverability when you're running around and fighting enemies. And then last but not least, on the Wizard's Tree, this is the part that makes our Forsaken and Traitor Bow become the strongest bows in the game, because unlike perks in like the Warrior Tree, for example, if we look at something like Slasher, where the cutting damage, for example, can get increased up to 30%, on the Warrior Tree, it specifically says melee cutting damage. But on the Wizard's Tree, any of the elemental damages say all ice damage or all fire damage. It's not limited to only melee or only magical weapons. It is any basically instance of that elemental damage across any weapon type. So picking up these actually increases the damage of our elemental bow as well. I heard a lot of people recently, for whatever reason, saying that you should pick up more points in intelligence because that increases your magic damage as well. It doesn't. You can take as many intelligence points as you want. It's going to be just a complete waste of your skill points. You get no bonus damage whatsoever with bows from intelligence. You only get it from the elemental specific skills like Arsonist, Iceman, and Thunder. So don't listen to anyone saying take points in intelligence on the bow for a hunter build. It is completely worthless. It does absolutely nothing. So for Wizard's Tree, 1 point in Spirit. This is useful. Gives us a little bit more mana for things like our Eternal Frost Arrow. Only 1 point into Mage Apprentice. We get +2 because of our Rings of the Ancients. It's kind of a throwaway. It doesn't do anything. But we're mainly taking that to get the point in Intelligence, followed by 3 points maxed out in Iceman, which will increase all the ice damage we do on our bow by an additional 30%. 3 points into Arsonist to give the fire damage on the bow an additional 30% bonus damage. Quick point in Intelligence, 1 point into Wizard just to move forward. Another point in Spirit for more mana, followed by 3 maxed out points into Thunder. This will increase the shock damage on our elemental bow by 30%. I toyed around with taking the point in Necromancer, followed by 3 points in Dark Arts, but the 6 points in the Dark Arts to increase just the 4 or 5% elemental damage on the bow to make the bow do a little bit more just wasn't worth it for the 7 additional skill points you would have had to spend. I felt like those 7 points were way more useful for things like Blink and some more of the survivability perks. So that's why I didn't go there. But we're still maxing out Ice, Fire, and Thunder, which is more than enough. You do a ton of damage with this build, even without Dark Arts. So still very, very strong and honestly not needed, in my opinion. So that is the new and improved skill build. I think the only thing left to do is to just pop all our consumables and see what our final attributes are. So let's go ahead and pop these. We'll do the Drac Soulward Flask. All of our food items here. Even do the Prayer of the Flame Scroll, because that does do more damage for us as well. Alright, so as it is, we can even grab the Baka buff. And if you have a dog or a cat, you can pet them to get the Paws Touch buff. That'll give you 25 more flat health as well, so remember to grab that. I don't know where my dog's running around right now, but that is another one you can grab too. But go over to our character here. And as it stands, we are at 1,248 health. Pretty squishy. This is more of a glass cannon build, but like I said, if you want a little bit more survivability, especially in the late game against some of like the big beefy Drac enemies that can like 1 or 2 shot you, if you just by throwing on the Sunpiercer chestplate and maybe swapping out a Ring of the Ancients for a Gemini ring, for example, you go from 1,200 health to 1,750 at this point. So a huge jump in survivability there. Plus, with the Gemini ring, you're going to be getting some lifesteal too. So that's a very easy way to add more survivability if you find that you're dying a little bit too much. I'm pretty good at dodging at this point with how much I've played the game. So I just like going max damage at all times. So that's why I run what I do. So let's go ahead and equip that back just so we can see what our max damage is going to be with everything that I recommend. So 1,248 health, 360 mana, which is more than enough with all the regen we're getting for our Eternal Frost arrows, 740 stamina, which is nuts, 40 melee damage, 148% range damage, and 70% magic damage. For our primary stats, we're sitting at 17 Constitution, 10 Spirit, maxed out 23 Endurance, maxed out 23 Dexterity, 8 Strength, and 11 Intelligence. We get really nice health and mana regeneration, but the big one is our stamina regeneration and stamina regeneration delay. 0.25 seconds is damn near instantaneously. It refills insanely quick if you ever run out, and the regeneration as it is sitting at 673, which is crazy. It just not only refills instantly, but refills very, very fast. Moving on to damage, this is where things get pretty crazy. We are sitting at 170% critical strike damage, and for critical strike chance, our base is 19, but for range, we get a bonus 17, putting us at 36% critical strike chance with bows. If you watched the combat demo, I'll probably add it to the end of this video as well, against the Fell Dragon boss. I crit and multi-shot like literally 5 or 6 shots in a row with this build, so even though it's like 40%-ish, it procs pretty frequently, especially if you're triggering multi-shot, because each one of those arrows can potentially crit, which is pretty nuts. Sneak attack damage 900%, merciless attack 500, backstab damage is at 70% because of the perks we took in the Assassin's Tree, and skill shot damage, which is currently bugged, is 151% bonus damage, which is crazy. We also get, because of the other perks we took, 24% bonus damage against all ranged enemies, 30% bonus damage against all flying enemies, 25% bonus damage against all Drac, 20% bonus damage against Fell, which technically could be 35 if we swap our one food item for the Genshin Tea, 20% bonus damage against Scavengers because of the Ka buff, and 10% bonus against all wildlife because of our particular skill point in the tree as well. Bows are sitting out flat 34% weapon damage and 48% weapon damage for daggers, which is pretty nuts. And then as you can see, we're using a fully elemental bow, and with the rings and the elemental perks we take, we got 50% bonus fire damage, 30% bonus ice damage, and 30% bonus shock damage. So very, very strong build. I'll quickly jump over to protection because this is kind of cool too. With the exact selection of armor choices I got, we were at a perfect deviation 251 across the board for both magical and physical protections, so equal resistances for both types of damage, which is awesome with this build as well. So all in all, super well rounded, very, very powerful, the hardest hitting bow hunter build that I've made thus far. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm going to have links into the description for the web UI tool that me and a fellow buddy on Discord created. I did double check it, and he has updated the tree with all the new skills that they did with the latest update. I think some of the skill point values are a little off in his tool right now. So the way I worked it out is it should be matching 1-to-1 with what I have in here, but the UI tool I think says it's at like 189 instead of 184 for max skills. So the total's off, but the skills visually should be correct. So you can copy that 1-to-1 as like a little cheat sheet. That link will be right down in the description. So feel free to share that and use it as reference to kind of make this build a little bit quicker instead of having to reference this long ass video a million times. So I'll throw that in there as well. But yeah, like I was saying, I've got my 2 other class videos like half in the works right now. There were some like build breaking bugs that I found that the devs weren't aware of. I submitted tickets for them. They are looking into it, and I just haven't gotten confirmation on them yet. And I want to bring you guys the best of the best builds possible. So as soon as I get confirmation on those 2 bugs, I'll be sure to get my warrior and wizard class build out as well. But for now, you guys got the killer hunter build, the 42-second dragon slayer build, if you will, which could have been honestly a little bit faster. I threw in a little added flare and chucked in an ultimate bow shot at the end, which added a little extra time. And I also got stunned in the beginning and mashed the wrong hotkey and took my water pump out. So there was probably a good 5-6 seconds I could have shaved off that even more. But yeah, all in all, super strong build. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. And if you do, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I love hearing all of your guys' feedback. It makes my day. And yeah, until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Later.